Hello and welcome to EduCurious. Today's special guest is Dr. Andy Oguntola. I've known him for years and I am so thrilled to have him on the show with us. He is now currently the Assistant Vice President of Enrollment at Florida Polytech, but he has spent his entire career in education, in the higher education in particular field. So Dr. Oguntola, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
But thanks for having me. I've known you forever, so I'm so glad to see you in this thriving in this environment. So it's so amazing.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now at Florida Polytech, and then we'll jump into how you came to have this position.
I am the Assistant Vice President of Enrollment Management, so I oversee the admissions department, recruitment, also to financial aid. So what we do is we go on the road, we make sure students have the opportunity, one, to learn about Florida Polytechnic University, bring them on campus, show them around, give phenomenal tours, talk about the financial aid opportunities, but also make sure they understand we're a STEM school, so we're STEM driven. We're the only STEM university in the entire state of Florida. We have the cheapest tuition as a public university in the state of Florida as well. Brand new dorms. The institution's only roughly 10 to 11 years old. And so next year, secrets out the bag, we'll be offering sports teams too. So we'll be moving to finally offering sports teams and really being collegiate at that opportunity. But we love what we do. Been doing education for over 17 years, and it's been fun just to give students an opportunity to make themselves better in the future.
Do you have traditional students mostly, or do you have some high school students doing any dual enrollment, or like what is the demographics of your population right now?
About roughly 75 to 85% of our students are undergrad, right? Our FTIC students, first time in college. Then we have our graduate programs. We do not offer any doctoral degrees yet, but hopefully down the road, fingers crossed, we'll be looking at that opportunity. And also, too, we're going to start really pushing that dual enrollment pipeline. We haven't really had a big, strong dual enrollment push, but been working with Polk County School Board. We believe we're going to be able to do some great things in the future to embrace our STEM institution.
So walk us through how you got started on your journey in education, because you've done just about everything and you were born a leader. I feel like anytime I interacted with you, take charge, get it done, do the next thing, and rise to the occasion. So break it down for us.
Getting an education was total accident. I didn't think about being in education. In fact, my bachelor degree was in pre-law, and I always wanted to be an attorney. And I remember 2 weeks before graduation took place at Weber International University, the president and the director of financial aid at that point in time saw me leaving class. And it was said to me, hey, there's a position that we think you should apply for. I replied back, what is that? And he said, an admissions counselor. And from there, it referenced maybe also taking care of my MBA. And so I said, let me give it a shot. And so through that time period, I was a road runner. I had the Central Florida all the way down to Miami and a couple different states in the Caribbean. But I fell in love with the opportunity of meeting students where they are. You're meeting first generation students who never had the opportunity to go to college. My journey is really interesting, right? Because I was the first person in my family to go to college. So by being that, I said, well, I'm going to meet students on the road who I can tell and share my story to. I laugh at sometimes, and I shared a story that my journey at Weber University started with, my dad and mom always worked 24/7. They didn't have time to go to any games in high school or share any moments. So I remember me trying to get to college for the first year, and I told my dad, hey, take me to school. He said, son, I got to go to work. So true story, I started Weber University with one of my buddies, Vernon Reed, and I came to school with one suitcase and one black trash bag full of clothes. And that's how I started. We didn't have the funds to get where we wanted to be, but my dad said, hey, do what you got to do. And I remember being dropped off by one of his good friends on the corner of Weber, and I had my black trash bag on my side and a suitcase, and I walked in and said, okay, I'm here. It's time to check in. And that's how education really started, from a young man not knowing where he was going to go, going to school, finding my way through Weber University, and it's been thriving since then, and then going to education by accident, and then loving what I'm doing 17 and a half years later.
Wow, it's so relatable. And you don't normally think that somebody in your position now started from like just the ground and pulled yourself up and went. Tell me a little bit about how important it is to you to make sure that students at your school get the opportunity for scholarships, because you have walked that road.
Yeah, so what we want to do is we want to make sure students understand the opportunities. We live in a world now where many students don't want to take out student loans, right? But also too, your families don't understand the process of for prepay or saving in advance. And merit scholarship is one of the best opportunities you can get. So we're looking for the best and brightest students, right? We want to make sure students have an opportunity to come to Florida Poly at that merit scholarship route. And so we push that opportunity for them. And we students who roughly have a 3.5 GPA and roughly like 24 in the ACT, maybe a 1250 in the SAT, we have some merit scholarship available for them to come on to Florida Poly. But I got to tell individuals who've never been to Florida Poly before, because they say, oh, that's that building line 4. That looks kind of funny. When you finally come on our campus, it's beautiful. Once you finally get there, you see it, you don't want to leave. And it brings a great nurturing environment for families and friends where students can thrive and have those small classroom opportunities, which just like me, where I thrived. I wasn't ready to be in a classroom full of, 300 students. I needed the 15 to 20 students where I knew everybody's names. When we walked the halls, you saw each other in the dorm rooms, and you build everlasting friendships like we have right now.
You do have pretty unique architecture on your campus, and your campus has been featured in some of the shows that I've seen recently for the architecture. I drove by recently and I marveled at it. And you've got a new pool. I've seen the campus just expanding. What's in store for the next couple of years with your school?
So, in fact, our brand new engineering building is going to open up in August. It's only going through the final steps right now. It's going to be a state of the art building for engineering students, and it's just going to be so beautiful. Additionally, too, roughly, and part of the strategic plan is to build a student achievement center where it's going to bring all of our enrollment departments, our financial aid departments, many different areas for students to really get involved in. I think as well, maybe even feature a new cafeteria. We're going to be bringing sports teams on board, maybe baseball, maybe softball, maybe cross country. A lot of great opportunities for students across our nation. One thing about us is that as it relates is we just don't recruit in Polk County. We can create the entire nation. We can go to the Caribbean. We can go down to Cali. We can have students come from Canada. And the great thing about it is when all these students finally come together, it creates a great melting pot of success where they can build everlasting relationships and create phenomenal alumni for the future when they know they can afford a Poly University.
What is your offering like for online learners? Because, I mean, with all that, I would want to be on your campus, but what about the people who just aren't able to get there physically?
We're going to offer our first online master's program for engineering management. That's going to start. And then down the road, we're going to start looking at different online offerings and more different modalities. But we're still getting there, right? Remember, we're only 10 to 11 years old right now. So back being there, we're having those conversations. We're trying to be fruitful. We're making sure we can meet students where they are. We can probably down the road meet a student in Texas who says, you know what, I want to come to Florida Poly and take some courses online. So the good thing is that Poly is a blank canvas where everybody has a paintbrush and we're all writing the picture and store it together.
Tell me how you cultivate the buy-in.
It all starts with leadership. We have an amazing president. Dr. Stevenson is probably the best president I've ever been a part of. His vision, his understanding, what he wants to get accomplished for students, but also too how he engages the community. He gets to tell a story, but it's relatable. He sees students where they are. He's a great president where we'll be walking down the hall. He'll see some students studying. He'll sit at their table and have a whole conversation with them. He sets up president pop-up tables where he can sit down and have a conversation with students anywhere. Like he passed out his presidential pins, everything he engaged on. And so it starts with the leader and he embraces everything else. And of course, when you bring me to the threshold and understanding, I understand so many parts of our community alone in Polk County. And so bringing individuals to my relationships who have understanding, who said, I've never been to Florida Poly before. We bring them on campus. We brought roughly every high school principal in Polk County to Florida Poly for training. And we're able to experience for the first time. Over 70% of principals have never seen Florida Poly before or been on our campus, but that's been removed, right? We have embraced them and they understand what we're trying to do. And so now when students are saying, hey, I'm thinking about going to STEM school, it's in the front of their mind saying, we have a great school in our backyard.
How do you recruit top-notch educators to facilitate all this learning at Florida Polytech?
Man, we have leadership, understanding what we are. We have a provost right now, Provost Thiessen. And so one of the things he does is he scours the nation for the best and brightest. We're looking for those individuals to sit in the classroom because we don't want our offerings where you sit in UF, you want the same experience at Florida Poly. If you sit at Florida State, you want the same experience at Florida Poly. And so by us being a public university, we want to make sure that students always say they had an amazing academic education. Right. There's one thing to also to have the student government associations and having the activities and recreational activities outside of campus. Yes. But we want to make sure that every class that you take sets you up for the future of employment, because at the end of the day, we have the lowest student debt, but also too, we have the highest salaries also being offered for students graduating in the state.
I want to go back a little bit about you. I want to hear some of your biggest accomplishments. You're allowed to brag. I just want to hear what are some of those things that have just brought pride to your heart?
So biggest accomplishment, honestly, is just being a husband and a father. That is to me that is the Del Corleone, right? In a sense, because I get to come home no matter what day it is, to an amazing family, an amazing wife who supported me when I wasn't Dr. Oguntola. And I think that's what individuals have to understand is that you have to find somebody who sees the potential in you. And so my wife saw that in me and blessed me with 4 amazing children. And so I think that the family for me is my biggest pride and joy. And then on top of that too, the ability to work in the community and create different opportunities. We believe in being fixers. So when we didn't have a strong Little League program, me and two buddies came together and said, you know what, let's build a Little League program that's competitive in the city of Lake Wells. And that same Little League program that first year went to the Super Bowl in IMG Academy. We were top 16 in the nation at one point in time for CBS Sports in little old Lake Wells. We bring athletes everywhere. Or I remember a time when we were in church, and I remember there was a young girl in church who was a senior, and me and my wife were sitting behind her. And I asked her, I said, so where are you going to school? She said, I'm going to school at Florida State. I said, really? That's so exciting. When did you get accepted? She said, I'm just about to apply. But I realized it was April. It was her senior year. She wasn't educated enough to understand that you should apply at roughly August. You're not going to get accepted to Florida State, but I didn't want to crush your dreams. So what it showed me in that moment as an educator, but also too as a parent, a future college student who's going to go to college, is that we have to create some opportunities. So I put a proposal together. I submitted to Lake Wells High School at that point in time, and I brought over the college fair. So the annual Lake Wells College Fair is a fair that I put together. I'm here in the city of Lake Wells through that opportunity, and we added to the Florida tour. So it became one of recognized tours in the state of Florida for high school students. And the first year we had it, I believe we broke over 900 students on campus. And since then, it's been over 1,000 students come to that fair. And then you saw the high school graduation and college going rate increase significantly because we brought colleges here to little old Lake Wells where students can have an understanding. And it's just giving students opportunity is what we're about.
Tell me about some of the awards that you've received, because you do stand out. People notice you. You walk into a room and people go, who's that guy? What is he doing? Because he's doing something that I want to be doing.
I remember when I received the Polk County Emerging Leader Award. That was an amazing award for myself. One, because I don't see myself as a forefront leader, a person that's out there. I just see myself as a person getting stuff done. You know, we want to eliminate excuses to make sure I give other individuals a better life than I had through recreation, through civil engagement, through education. And so when I received that award, that was really, really an opportunity where I was able to pause and say, well, I guess I'm doing something pretty good, right? Along with the other things. You know, we really don't look at, those, I got a couple community service awards, community awards, everything you can think of. But to me, we just, awards that you put on your cabinet and look at them. They don't mean anything after that. The question is, what are you doing in the future? How can you keep it going? So, if you come to my office right now, I don't have any awards up. I just we just put those in the boxes.
So, what are your plans for the future? What do you perceive in the next couple of years?
The Lord's will. I've always wanted to be a college president. That is my end goal one day. If the Lord permits it, I'm excited about that. But if he doesn't, I'm okay. I'm okay because I've been able to help change lives each and every day. I want my children to be better than me. We set the standard. I'm happy that my father could look at me and say, you know what, everything he's ever worked hard for has come to fruition with me and my sisters. And so I hope and pray that I have the opportunity one day to have my own institution, my own university where I can give that opportunity, but also I can find young children who look just like me or you in the world who say, you know what, I want an opportunity, and we can give it to them, which is the difference.
You've got a high school senior that's just about to graduate. What have you learned on the process, like you mentioned, about the application process and the big unknown for parents? Like, that is a really scary time for parents. First, like the year before, where you are doing the applications and then leading up to it. What advice do you have for this phase of life?
You've asked an amazing question. I think that I've been blessed to get this position now at the state university system because my son is going to college. So me going on college tours has been different. One, because I understand the process. I'm going through the process and I have a son who wants to go to college. So I've been able to go to so many different universities and private and public to have the conversation and go through their tour process. But what I realized in that moment was even for me and my wife, who is also an educator, if we weren't in this field, we'll be absolutely lost. And what it shows is that we have to do a better job at the freshman year level of explaining to high school students what the opportunities are for them, but also to engaging their parents immediately. The biggest problems is parents don't understand how to fill out a FAFSA. They don't understand the Pell Grant opportunities if they meet those Pell Grant positions. They don't understand how we can make a difference as far as scholarships because many students say, I can't pay for schools. But pretty much every university has a foundation where you can go ahead and apply for scholarships and have those conversations, but we don't know how to apply for them. And I think that embracing those opportunities as far as immediately from their freshman year and sophomore year and starting to do college visits their sophomore year will change the game immediately because you want to figure out what's best for you. Because the biggest mistake I've seen many students make are committing to schools they've never even been to before. And they finally get there and said, I didn't think it was like this. Well, you never came and visited. How do you know it's for you? So I told my son every time we go to university, don't worry about what, the admission counselor, quote unquote, tells you. Go ask a student and say, how do you like it here? Find somebody that you kind of would say, they would be in my circle. I would talk to them and ask them what do they like and what they don't they like, and that will help you make your decision going.
What else do you think would be beneficial for our local school systems to help get our students ready for higher education opportunities?
This has been a dream of mine for a long time. I dream that, especially in the city of Lake Wells, that over the summer that we can come together and I could maybe create something where we as an institute, a community, can build roughly a 2 to 2.5 month process where every other week we're taking 50 to 100 students in Lake Wells who are juniors to different universities within the state. Let them see something. You know, there's so many great education leaders here, but the problem is we can't get these kids on buses over the summer. Their parents can't afford to take them to a university. But what about us? We can come together. We're talking about something that could be really creative and make us a much tighter community where we can see students graduating in the bush slopes. And I think that would be an amazing opportunity, along with, offering more educational opportunities for parents and, bringing FAFSAs to parents, having FAFSA nights every month and have those conversations. But most importantly, teach them the difference between a private school and a public school. That's huge. Or the Florida residency process. Individuals think just because I'm a Florida resident, I get in-state tuition. But you got to fill out a form and provide documents for that. So just a little tidbits I think is needed.
So what about some of the challenges that you faced on your education career?
Some of the challenges I faced is at first, because I was so young in the game and I was excelling so quickly, and many individuals didn't think I could do the job because I was so young, right? And so you get involved and you have those opportunities. You want to sit at the table. But one of the best quotes I ever heard is a mentor gave it to me and said, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." I was like, that's interesting, right? That's an interesting perspective. And so we really try to get seats at the tables to create a difference. And I believe every voice matters. No matter where you are in life, you can have those conversations, you can evolve. And so I think those are my biggest struggles, was that just trying to get to the table, trying to have those conversations and trying to make a difference.
Where do you see that we need more people in the workforce in the education sector? Is it in the classroom, or is it in higher ed, or just from your vantage point, where do you see that next group of career people needing to be diverted?
I think because we have so much artificial intelligence coming through now, and there's so much AI, we have to really inform our students to find a career now, a trade in a sense, or an area in STEM that's high performing and high paying. Because the way AI is moving now wasn't the same it was 4 years ago, and it's ever growing. And so then when you look at our professionals, our teachers in the classrooms, especially in the K through 12 system, one of the biggest issues currently is many students now don't want to be teachers, and it's getting harder and harder to find teachers and value teachers. I was teaching a class in the graduate level at another university, and one of my projects was, I said that you need to go ahead and figure out who was your best teacher that you ever had. Everybody has a story of their favorite teacher. And I said, well, what we're going to do at the end of the year is that we're going to invite your favorite teacher to our classroom, and you're going to finally express that to them. And when they finally did, the tears that were flowing and the joy that was flowing, because many teachers said, I needed this. But I didn't think I was going to continue, move forward. I thought this would be my last year. And so I realized in those moments is that the way teachers would have been valued just 10 years ago isn't the same way it is today.
So, Andy, who's your favorite teacher and why?
My favorite teacher was Sally Soltron from Highlands Elementary, my fourth grade teacher, because she took time with me. She saw the opportunity and the potential in Andy before Andy ever existed. And so Sally Soltron was probably one of the best things that ever happened for me. And I finally told her that roughly 6 years ago, right? I found her, told her that. And part of the process was the tears and everything flowed. And the crazy part about it was she says, I was just about to retire, but I need this. So those are those moments that help you and say how important it is.
You mentioned the AI and the integration. Tell me about it from a STEM perspective, what we need to know now and kind of where it's headed in the near future, as far as you can tell.
So when I look at AI really can assist students in every capacity. And our president right now, Dr. Stevenson, said, you know what? We don't want to be on the back end of AI. We want to be on the front end. And so we're looking at ways now to go ahead and implement AI in our practices, our daily work, and how do we do it? So right now, our team is looking at ways as far as enrollment processes and financial aid processes to help students. We're looking at ways where, for a parent who didn't understand FAFSA at all, imagine going onto our webpage and you're asking questions about the FAFSA, and we have an AI chatbot that's there and assists you through the whole process. Gets it done and reviews it for you, even looks at your taxes in a sense and says, we believe projected this will be the amount you owed. Imagine how much pressure that will take off a student, right? The opportunities. You can use AI in so many great ways. You can use AI in some bad ways too, right? You can only hurt yourself if you decide to use ChatGPT for all your papers and everything else, because when the real work starts and you have to get in there by yourself, you're behind the eight ball. But you can use ChatGPT for some other things, right? To become more efficient in processes and actual conversations. So I think that is good. It's twofold, but the question is, how do we implement it in our daily work to be more successful, more efficient, and productive going forward?
How's your university navigating the compliance aspect of that with all of the laws kind of just coming out? It's the Wild West at the moment.
Every day is ever changing, right? We're trying to stay in front. We're trying to have conversations. We have our academic side of the house who are doing some great work. Our president's doing great work, looking at legislation issues, because understand every year there's going to be a new law. There's going to be a new process. There's going to be a new AI. There's going to be a new chatbot. So just when you finally put something in place, it'll change in 6 months or change from a year. So right now, it's all hands on deck trying to figure out how we can make it beneficial for not just faculty and staff, but also most importantly for our students, where they feel successful as well.
I'm wondering how to get all that in our public schools now at a much younger level so they're ready for when it,
Imagine AI being offered in kindergarten.
right?
How do you do it, right? What is the conversation? Is it that we look at AI and it really helps us with our reading? We talk about the third grade reading level for the state of Florida is what, less than 50%. So how do we fix that? How can we have AI look at the curriculum for from kindergarten to third grade and figure out how do we implement new strategies and more efficiencies to create better readers going forward?
Do you have any thoughts about curriculum since you've really been involved in so many different aspects of higher education? Do you have some takeaways or some advice on that? Since you just mentioned curriculum, I thought that's a big part that isn't always discussed.
Yeah. So let's even jump into K-12 real quick. I work in the K-12. One of the biggest things I've seen is that curriculum at times becomes complacent, right? You'll have a school who's done something the same way for 15 years, but technology has changed, processes have changed, laws have changed, but the curriculum is still the same. Why not change the curriculum every 6 years, right? Why not look at it and say, how do we make it better for students? It may have worked for that generation, but for this generation, it doesn't work. I look at, it's going to sound crazy. I've been through I have so many different degrees and opportunities and been engaged and everything else. My son comes in one time, he was 9 at the point in time, and brought me some math. And I was going to do some math old school way. And he said, no, daddy, we do it this way. And I said, why do you do it that way? It's just much harder. But these are things that's changing. But in that situation, for that parent, me who was educated, what if we said that for students in K through 5, that anytime we had math, or let's say it was reading, that once every school also had YouTube videos that were in sync with the lesson, where parents who came home can just hit the YouTube link to see what the student learned and then go ahead and link it up to make sure the student's doing the homework the right way. Because I was going to bring the old school approach, but my son says there's a new school approach, but I wasn't taught that. So how do I find it if the teacher's busy or the teacher has to worry about the other 60 students they have to focus on? But I wish I was able to go online to their school's website and hit the link and say, okay, well, this is the lesson, and now I can teach it to you home. Because the biggest issue is that many families expect the teaching to only just be done at the elementary school, but teaching is also done at home. And it needs to be an assistance process.
So cohesive curriculum, there's like the pros and the cons. There's charter schools want to have more autonomy within each class. Public school wants to have standardized because your kid might be in this school over here and another one in that school. There needs to be some consistency. Where do you see that balance taking place?
So that's the catch-22, right? I've been a part of charter schools that have full autonomy. I've been in charter schools who are compliant, have correct curriculum all across the board, right? I've been a part of public schools and seen the work that's done and everything streamlined with a curriculum. But it should be transparent. Autonomy is good if it's fair. Are the outcomes reflecting everything you've done to be free in the way you engage students is the question. And so I think that I'm a data person now. I look at data for the historical context. I try to see what the outcomes are and have those conversations. But everybody has their way of doing things. Like even the homeschool has taken off the last 2 years. Right? Families say, you know what, I don't want my child there. I want to have them in homeschool. And so, parents want to give a certain education now or expect a certain education. But I can say at least parents are getting involved now. That's changed the perspective because parents weren't involved roughly 5 years ago the way they are now.
So ideally, what do you think is a good school home balance with your child's or your children's education?
Pretty much all my children are athletes. So there's no balance. It's literally you go to school, you either have practice I'm using my daughter as a great example. Let's use her. So my daughter is roughly 12 years old now, and what happens? She's going to go to school. She's going to come home. At that point in time, she's going to have dance practice or she's going to have flag football practice. So by the time I get home, sometimes she's not even here. She probably won't get in the house till 8 o'clock. Then she still has homework. Then she'll knock out her homework, and then now she's going to bed. If she hasn't eaten dinner, roughly about 9:30, 10 o'clock, but has to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So where's the balance, right? So you take a traditional student who has no athletics or anything involved. You say, okay, now what does that look like? Well, there's tutoring opportunities because now mom and dad, their schedule, depending on what time mom gets home, does she get home at 5 or does she get home at 9 p.m.? So that whole work and family balance to me now has really not been what it's been explained to be throughout the years. Everything has changed. And what I always tell people now, do what's best for your family, right? I have a saying, I can only do what's best in 972, right? Which is my address, right? I can only do what's best here. But I thank God where I have a wife who has really been engaged. And really, by the time I get home, she's got the kids all over the table. Everybody's doing their homework. Everything's lined up. They've eaten dinner. Everything's good to go. And now I'm sitting walking the house, either on the phone, working emails, in meetings, in community events. And so there's times where I said, well, I haven't been such an impactful father. I don't feel like I've been efficient, but I've been efficient enough for everybody else, but I'm not efficient enough for my children, right? There's some things I got to sacrifice to make sure my kids are getting enough of their daddy as well. So that to me is a tough struggle with the balance process.
So do you think it's a conversation to see, do we need to change the way a traditional K through 12 school day looks like?
I'm going to be doing some research on that to see how it plays out because if you go to a 4-day work week, what happens on Friday when parents are still working? Who's watching these kids? What does that happen? I know the way school hours changed this year really messed things up because before the middle high school started early because many times parents are still working. High school students came home to watch their siblings. But because school hours changed in the state of Florida this year, it knocked everything out of whack. And so I see they're repealing back some of those rules and laws this year. The question is, what way do we create better readers? What ways do we strengthen our mathematics? What ways do we increase our STEM for future jobs? Right. And I think, and we look at that question and we start there and work it back. That'll give us hopefully a better solution to the problem that we have.
So being a data-driven person, you're looking at the numbers from the higher ed side, and as you walk it back, what advice do you have going all the way to the beginning of someone's career in education, kindergarten, going up? What do you think we need to focus on as educators to make that happen?
Elementary is the key. Elementary is the key because at that point in time, you shouldn't be in high school as a freshman, sophomore, and you still can't read, right? Then you ask yourself, well, how did they make it this far? So the question is, how do we strengthen? How do we give more funds, right? Because everything's about money. Everything is about legislation. Everything is about dollars. How do we strengthen the elementary school system? Here's a crazy thought, right? Not saying you do it, you don't do it. What if we said that elementary school teachers made roughly 15% more? That will create an opportunity where many teachers will flock towards you. If you're a highly effective elementary school teacher or a highly effective teacher, you can make 15% more if you went to elementary, right? Does this help the process? We got to ask ourselves, well, how do we impact that third grade reading level? How do we make sure those kids at fifth grade have met the standards to get ready for middle school, right? Because in middle school comes, now you're moving to different classes. You're having that opportunity. We're embedding more technology. Everything's changing, but are you ready for it? And we know that every elementary is a little bit different, right? Some have, some are arts driven, some are STEM driven, some aren't.
So you brought up an incredibly important point about pay for performance. What are your thoughts on that?
Sweden pays their teachers the highest. I think Sweden pays teachers, significant salaries, and they say they pay more than doctors. They say because you want to be a doctor if you want for the teacher, right? So when we look at pay for performance, I'm not necessarily sure that's the right way to do it. But I think that what if we just valued teachers more, right? We saw them in a different light. They were seen the same way we see astronauts, the same way we see governors, the same way we see these high-ranking leaders, because they are. Unless you're a teacher, you don't understand what's taking place in that classroom, right? The respect, the long nights, the getting ready for the lesson, the studying that needs to be done, the reviewing of homework and quizzes, and teaching every student is differently. You have 25 or 20 different personalities in classrooms, and you have to teach and gear to each one.
What other topics do you feel like are on the forefront or something that has just been chatter recently that excites you about education?
I would say on the forefront right now is where Florida's going to be by 2030. We know that there's an initiative right now to say that we want to create the biggest workforce and workforce jobs by 2030 based on our legislation. And now every state college university is trying to really look at that workforce opportunity, right? So you're looking at more CDLs getting given. You're looking at more PTA programs, OTA program, more nurses. Nurses have to be put streamlined on there. So after we get to 2030, what does 2040 look like? What is going to be the new initiative then? Us being in Polk County alone, we know we have probably one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, right? So how do we educate all these individuals when we haven't built any new schools, when everything's still landlocked in a sense, but everybody's coming here to get this great Florida opportunity, this great understanding, but also too, what does our new county look like in 10 years? When you embrace all these different cultures, when you embrace this melting pot of individuals coming from out the state and saying, well, you guys did education this way, but what if you tried education that way? Where I was from, we did things this way. So I'm really interested right on the forefront to see once we pass 2030, as far as everybody coming together right now to push more nurses, more doctors, more physicians, more firefighters, more police, and everything else. What's the new push?
So what resources are you always plugged into to stay relevant on your current events, your policies, your procedures? Where's your go-to?
So I'm Chronicles. I'm inside higher ed 24/7. In fact, I have a morning routine. I wake up at roughly 5:30 in the morning. By 5:45, I'm looking at all the inside higher ed comments that took place the day before. I'm in Chronicles of Education, understanding that. I have a couple different links that are sent to me consistently. Of course, I have my colleagues throughout the state. But most importantly, when roughly February comes all the way to May, June, I'm in legislation. I'm reading bills. I'm understanding everything that's taking place. I'm trying to figure out what will correlate to the current work that we do right now and affect our institution and universities. But most importantly, I don't just focus on me, I focus on my kids too. What's going to impact my children from a K through 12 aspect, right? What should I be aware of as we prepare to move forward? So I think that's how I plug in each and every day, but I have to feed myself consistently full of knowledge.
What are a couple that you recommend that any parent or educator should be plugged into? Maybe like top 3 or 4.
Sign up for Inside Higher Ed. It's free. Right? You'll wake up every morning, you'll get an email, roughly the 4 to 5 biggest things that have taken place as far as positions that are policy issues, new bills upcoming, changes on the West Coast that may affect the East Coast. So that to me, number one, is a winner. That's like, in a sense, other than my Bible, right? 2, the Florida Gov. I'm always looking at the Florida Gov for bills, trying to see what's taking place. Now, you got to have a heart and a passion to read bills, because we know bills can be 100 plus pages, right, of reading and everything else in the context. But I tell you that once you go through the process the first couple of times and you understand the passion for it, you'll be good to go. But also too, if there was a book I would give somebody, it'll be How Full Is Your Bucket? Because it looks at the ways of, many times we talk about your plate is full and you can't work. But the way How Full Is Your Bucket says, you're only as good as you're only meeting your capacity as best you can be when your plate is actually full, right? Because we have over roughly 10,000 moments that in a day that takes place. I walk down the street, somebody said hi to me. That was a moment, right? What does that do? There's positive and negative moments. For every positive moment, it's dropping in your bucket. It's dropping in your bucket to go ahead and full. And when you have so many positive moments, your bucket is overflowing of ideas and concepts. So that's really a great book for me.
Tell me about what has worked well for you as a leader, schedule-wise, priority-wise, just like what advice you would have for that young leader coming up who says, ooh, I should probably put some things in place to make sure I get here one day.
What makes it better is just be transparent with your family about your schedule. But here's one thing that I do, and I've made as my rule, especially for a young leader, is that anytime my children have something of importance, I don't care what's on the schedule, I'm there. That is my number one rule, because I was that young kid back in the day where my dad didn't come to events because he was working. I played football in high school and I was really good and everything else. And I remember looking in the stands, and for me, it was full, but it was empty in my mind because my dad was never there. So I never had a point where my kids had an event that I couldn't be there. And so if it's a softball game, if it's a track meet, if it's a weightlifting meet, if it's a soccer meet, if it's so-and-so, I'm there. If I'm late, I start having anxiety as I'm trying to get there, right? But I need my kids to know that I'm going to be there to support them. So no matter what leader it is and who you are in life and how you get it done, you got to make a commitment now at this early stage to say, you know what, when it comes to family, I want to sacrifice everything for my family. That's my rule.
And then what about scheduling and planning and prioritizing? How do you get a handle on that?
Well, when you get in these positions, at the end of the day, whatever the president says is priority. That is no matter what's on your schedule, whatever the supervisor says is your goal. At that point in time, you got to be efficient. You can't be a micromanager. You got to delegate. There's some things that you don't even need to do. when you get to a certain level, there's things that you shouldn't be doing. And that's the reason why you have people on your team. You hire the subject matter experts. There's strengths and weaknesses to everybody's team. So what I do when you come on my team, I give you a strength finder. I need to figure out what your top 5 strengths are immediately, because at that point in time, I can figure out, okay, this project here have for you because your strength was data. Then here you go. Or you're analytical. Here's the project for you. Like my number one strength says I'm an achiever. No matter what you give me, I'm gonna achieve. And it was different because I would have said before that I believe I'm a competitor. A competitor and achiever are 2 separate things. And I realized that in this process in my life.
All right, we're getting towards the end of our show. Dr. Oguntola, do you have any words of wisdom or closing thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. So just to you, Amber, what you're doing right now as far as being able to interview all the different educators and have understanding is just so phenomenal. And just really proud of you and everything you're accomplishing here in our community. I would even say as far as word of wisdom for any young leader coming up, just be transparent. Stay true to yourself. Understand that we're here to make a difference in somebody's life, but also to give students an opportunity. So don't fall for the traps. Don't fall for situations that will go ahead and, taint your character or put you in a bad place of integrity. Always understand that we have one life to live and really have to make a difference in this life that we have. And so to everybody, I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking time with me today to learn a little bit more about myself and share with our community.
Thanks so much, Dr. Oguntola. It's been a pleasure as always. And whether you're a teacher, a parent, or just EduCurious, join the community as we explore various educational topics and learn from each other. We'll see you next time.